Welcome to the Unapologetic Heroine podcast, where myth is made manifest. As the author of The Way of Inanna, a heroine's guide to living unapologetically, this podcast is based on Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and war who embodies multidimensionality and lives unapologetically true to her heart. We showcase the wisdom of individuals courageous enough to do the same. These are inspiring stories of what it takes to be authentically who you are. My guests honor the wisdom of love, embrace the polarities of being human, and walk their truth. I am your host, Seana Zelazo, licensed psychotherapist, intuitive channel, and author of the book, The Way of Inanna. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome my guest today. Emily Blefeld is an internationally known systemic family constellations facilitator and trainer, psychotherapist, gifted intuitive, mystic, and sought-after presenter. Together with her partner, Dan Cohen, Emily runs Seeing with Your Heart, a unique methodology and comprehensive training program based on therapeutic constellations work for group and individuals. I have known Emily for many years now, and she has become a dear friend. I have witnessed the work she does on countless occasions, and she is truly one of the most transformative healers, teachers, and empowerment guides of our time. She specializes in working with visionaries, innovators, healers, and agents of change to support a transmutation of old paradigms and outdated narratives that keep them from reaching their highest potential. Her remarkable intuition allows her to track inherited familial and soul trauma through generations and incarnations to assist in releasing energetic blocks. She holds an MSW from the University of Minnesota and is a licensed independent clinical social worker, certified in numerous modalities. Emily teaches worldwide. And in addition to individual and couples constellations therapy, Seeing with Your Heart offers programs that include the one-of-a-kind certification in alchemical constellations, as well as programs for the empowered empath and sage soul, and retreats to enhance creativity and a connection to source. Emily's background is based in a rigorous clinical and psychological training, and she effortlessly merges this experience with her mystic nature. Welcome, Emily. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to share this space with you today.
Thank you so much, Seana, for having me here on this podcast and for such an incredibly beautiful introduction. I feel so seen.
Oh, thank you. One of the reasons I wanted to speak with you is how much you align with the goddess Inanna. You both share the same message of heart-centered wisdom. Indeed, the name of your company or practice, which you run with your partner, Dan Cohen, Seeing with Your Heart, captures the essence of your work. I have heard you describe the heart as an organ of perception. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, Inanna is one of my deepest teachers. And when I realized she's collaborating with you in writing this book and teaching our larger collective, it just inspired me beyond the beyond, because she's in the root system of my wisdom around teaching through the organ of perception and leading through the organ of perception and relating through this organ of perception that is our heart. So whenever I open the doors to my heart, Inanna is there as a deep counsel and guide. So thank you for bringing her message forward and asking this question. In terms of the heart as an organ of perception, I find that each of us has a portal that travels back into the recesses of our lived experiences, and into the ancestral and intergenerational patterns that stand behind us. And as you open the back doors of your heart, you can see how the fractals that you're living, the patterns that you're living in your own life, your own internal struggles, your own challenges, your relationship patterns, symptoms like anxiety, depression, difficulty at work, all of these things that are here oftentimes are echoes of something that occurred earlier in time, whether in your life, in your parents' lives, grandparents' lives, or great-grandparents' lives. And many of us seek therapy or medication or everyday transformative healing to try to transmute these difficulties that I call, they occur on the first dimension. And through the portals of our heart, we can actually travel to the origin, just like a flower can reach down the vine to touch its roots. We can travel through the back doors of our heart through these organs and perceive the origins of where not only our challenges come from, but our blessings and our gifts and our talents and our skills. So every human is endowed with this incredibly connective quality that lives within their cells and in their being and in every organ. And I like to support people in opening the front doors to see into their future and opening the back doors to see into their past so that they can easily heal and transmute the patterns that are coursing through them or causing interference in their lives, as well as open to becoming the living embodiment of their deepest intentions. And for many generations and centuries, one of the greatest successful conquests has been to divide and conquer humans from being in relationship to one another through the heart and being in relationship to the earth through the heart. So I find that as a therapist and a mystic and facilitator of the beauty way, I am interested in helping people to access this perception that is so much wider than anything that the brain can access. That the heart has almost more neurons firing that can connect us to the earth, connect us to one another, and transmute hate into love.
I am so grateful that you are doing this work. It is such powerful work and so useful at this time. Can you tell us a little bit about what family constellations is, the approach is, for folks that may not know?
Mm-hmm. So I arrived at systemic family constellations as I had originally been working as a psychotherapist and coach, working with visionaries and artists and entrepreneurs that were looking to manifest big vision and break through barriers to their success. And in the process of arriving, in the process of supporting them, I found that they often struggled with this insatiable desire that lived inside. And no matter how productive, effective, or creative they were in the world and how good their lives looked on the kind of outside cover of their existence, the inside felt empty. Like there was this emptiness that couldn't quite be filled, this void. And I went looking for modalities that could serve kind of the soul of a human. And in the process, I discovered systemic family constellations. At the time, I wasn't that interested in ancestry. I wasn't like somebody who is, studying my genealogy or asking questions about my great-grandparents. But I was interested in what heals the human heart, what heals patterns that seem that they won't heal, what fills that soulful energy where you can be a fully expressed, embodied, rhythmic, kind of drumming walker of love on earth. And systemic family constellations, absolutely in like one session, it blew my mind. It kind of awakened, it ignited my heart. And I found when I brought it to my clients, the impact was beyond anything I could ever have imagined. What I did in a year of therapy, I was seeing the results in 1 to 3 sessions. It's not the easiest thing to describe because it's done very differently by all different facilitators. But the essence of it is that you work with the perception of the body. So you are teaching people to come into harmonic resonance with their bodies and sense into a systemic field. So the systemic field, that all of us walk around with a constellation. We all, if we weren't cut at the umbilical cord at birth, we would be walking around with our mother and our fathers and our mother's parents and grandparents. We'd be connected. And so although the umbilical cord is cut, there's this invisible umbilical cord that connects us to the life that created us. And through that cord, we inherit anywhere from 3 to 17 generations of trauma memory. That's at least shown in research. And you can imagine what hasn't yet been able to be detected in research. The inherited trauma memory that is showing up on our cellular level in our epigenetics reflects that we are connected not only to our the traumas maybe our parents went through, but the people that are involved in those trauma. So some descendants perhaps of the Holocaust may have, although they may be a Jewish descendant, they may be connected to the heart of the Nazi people, because the Nazi people are part of what changed the fate of that Jewish lineage. It caused people to be displaced from their homes or move to new locations, or to have new grandparents, because some were killed in the Holocaust or in the war. So because of that, we have this kind of systemic quality where we are not only connected to the trauma memory of those that came before us, but those parties that are involved in that trauma. And systemic constellations looks at how do we heal the inherited trauma that is living in our current lives or our current biology or our current family systems, and release it back to the ancestral origins that it comes from, and heal our lives in the present. That's basically the essence of it.
Thank you so much. That's so clear and easy for me to understand, and certainly for listeners to understand, something that, to your point, is done differently by different practitioners or facilitators. And what I love about your approach is the depth of your intuition. And how did you come to recognize how intuitive you are? And was it always accessible to you from early on, or was it something that revealed itself later in life?
I've always been incredibly intuitive and very visual in my capacity to see what somebody's describing. I can see it in my mind's eye. And up until probably my early 30s, I had thought I was just incredibly imaginative. I would have these beautiful visuals in my mind as somebody was sharing their story with me. And as a psychotherapist, it lended itself beautifully because I was empathic and able to track the depths of one's despair as well as the details of their vision. And it helped me to support them in manifesting in my own life these greater visions. But it wasn't in my early 30s where during the process of working with systemic family constellations, we would open the field. So somebody would come in with a presenting issue, we'd close our eyes and we'd tune in and open our hearts to the issue that they're coming with. And then from that space, you would set up the field of the issue. So we might have a person represent somebody's symptom, or you might have a person represent somebody's parent or grandparent. And these are total strangers. Like in a group therapeutic process, they'd be complete strangers. And they stand in this room, and they just feel what is happening in the person's heart. During this systemic constellation process, we are opening to the field of ancestors, and you're welcoming in the traumas that came before. And so what would happen when I would close my eyes and I'd open my heart to a client is I would see the deceased ancestor arrive in our room, just as if they were showing up into a therapy practice, like they're sitting in my waiting area. And oftentimes they would arrive early, like 2 days early. If I was going to be doing a group on Saturday, these ancestors would start showing up and they would literally sit down in my waiting room. And I started to wonder, am I losing my mind? Is this the beginning of psychosis? I was an evidence-based psychotherapist at the time, learning this beautiful family therapy modality. And up until that time, my intuition was really tapped into creative endeavors and supporting people and manifesting their initiatives and projects, which is a comfortable thing to imagine in your mind's eye. But when all of a sudden ghosts are now arriving into your office, it became an incredibly destabilizing and uncomfortable time for me. And I questioned, am I going to end up with a frontal lobotomy or institutionalized for the rest of my life? And I actually took myself to 2 neuropsychologists to be evaluated to determine if this is early stages of schizophrenia. What happened over time was that I realized what I was seeing was incredibly accurate. I could describe somebody's grandparent or great-grandparent with accuracy. I could describe the child who was who was born and then killed after, in some tragic accident, and the grief that was occurring for that mother. I could hit the details with a level of precision that was uncanny without any kind of training or comfort. And it became a huge process to navigate my life, but it was so beneficial for this particular modality in that I could identify the origin of the trauma and the symptom that somebody was coming in with, work directly with the living person in the room as well as the ancestor, and heal both. And that was the thing I found was the most powerful and beautiful, is that, I always wonder sometimes, is the living person in my room my client, or am I serving those that have passed on? That in some ways, I think in my direct practice at this time, the dead are more my client than the living, because they're receiving healing and resolution around whatever was unresolved in their hearts during the time of their death or during the time of the trauma that is still vibrating generations and generations later. Oftentimes it skips generations, like somebody's child. If your mother had a difficulty, then the grandchild will pick up the symptom, whereas the child has less challenges. So it's not always that way, but many times I'm working every other generation. And Seana, you came into my life at that time. My sister-in-law was dear friends with Seana, and I shared with her how much I was having difficulty in being in life, like how to be here, to sit at a dinner party at a restaurant, particularly living in New England where everything is historic. Every restaurant, every space has the deceased walking around in it. And particularly when there's difficult challenges or difficult conversations, they arrive with intensity. And so as I navigated living with these open organs of perception and accepting it, it also invited me to just begin to understand, why am I actually here? What is my sole purpose? And why this gift of seeing has arrived in my life. And Inanna and you were instrumental connecting with you and learning, opening my Akashic records and tapping into the histories of lifetimes that I've had on this earth, where I have worked as an oracle, was a reminder that I'm not crazy, that I'm here for a reason, and that it's time to find a way to utilize this gift. And I am so grateful, forever grateful to you and to her for the ways that you both have guided me to integrate it, to find my footing, to accept it, and then to help other seers, knowers, feelers, healers of all kinds to work with their intuitive gifts.
Oh, I'm so grateful you shared this. That's so beautiful, and certainly so powerful for folks to understand when this occurs, when we open to our intuition, what it might look like. And I empathize with your experience of the impact of being in such a historical part of the world, where literally all locations have such opportunity to connect with the dead right there. So Thank you for sharing that. It's really powerful for folks to understand what you came to understand about yourself, that this is a gift, and this is so just a wonderful opportunity to then share this gift, to be in service with it.
And it just to add to it, connecting to your book, The Way of Inanna, A Heroine's Guide to Living Unapologetically. At the time that gift arrived, I was in the deepest descent of my life. My powers of perception opened during what I might have described as the underworld of my own existence. I was in a divorce. I was going through a divorce with my partner. I was actually stepping into who I am, and it was rocking the boat of my relationship in a way that I can't even, looking back on it now and looking back at the structures of the life I was living, there was no way I could become who I was here to be without shedding, my regalia in the ways that Inanna might describe it. I had to really let go of a lot of the securities I had acquired in life and the relationship structures and the love that I had in my life. There was a way where I was opening to my soul, and I had designed a whole life around a smaller, more limited version of myself. And as my heart was opening and my soul was beginning to align with an embodied vibrational way of being, my relationship was falling away. My that my current like 9 to 5 kind of gritty job no longer served me, and I had to answer the call. But it was a profound descent, and that actually is when Inanna arrived. So I always say for people, it seems like that when the underworld arrives, so does the deepest gifts that are seeking to break through the barriers that live within us.
Absolutely. And it's so hard for us to see that truth when we're really in that descent. So the reminder is really important. And it really helps us if we're able to receive that kind of guidance. It helps us to look for it when we are in that place. So thank you so much for sharing that. And you were referencing something that I have heard you talk about in the past around the idea that when someone declares their intention to carry out whatever it is their heart is seeking, they almost immediately meet resistance. That's something that you have taught. And I really hear that happening for you, or happened at least for you in that process. And is there something that is most useful when we meet that type of resistance? Have you observed ways in which we are able to dissolve it with greater ease when it shows up? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always say that you can tell the power of something by the force it takes to resist it. So when you set a very powerful intention, almost immediately you meet the force of its resistance. And oftentimes it's an inherited, I find many of our intentions can be connected to the lineage that we come from, whether it's our family or our soul lineage. So if you have an intention in life to bring forward to write a book, or you have an intention to step into an abundant healing practice in life, or you have the intention to open your heart to love and receive love, it's common that when you go to actualize that and you step into, like, put the pen in hand and begin the writing, or to begin marketing yourself out in the world and looking to brand your practice and get your voice out there. Or you say, okay, I'm going to create a profile, I'm going to go online and I'm going to start dating. The voices arrive in our head that want to like grip our throat and tear us down, stand between us and our greatest, expression of self. So it's common that voice is an inherited pattern. So there have been somebody in your lineage, for example, who put themselves out there and became visible and was burned and hung for it, or somebody that tried to step out into some form of entrepreneurship, or embrace their career, the deepest passion of their life, and make it a career, and then went bankrupt. And so there's this way where the descendant carries a shared intention, like, I'm going to be seen, I want to be visible, I want to make an imprint, I want to have a legacy. And then automatically the inherited trauma arrives that's associated with the root of that desire, or the root of that intention. And when the inherited trauma arrives, it arrives like an echo, like a ripple, like you throw a stone in a pond and you'll see the ripples. It takes the same shape. So they step out to brand themselves or make their business known, and all of a sudden they get they meet some barrier, some struggle that takes down their practice. So as I'm sitting with answering the question, like intention and resistance, the intention actually is that the oracle way, that the mystical way, that the return of the Venusian powers of love infiltrate every human cell on the civilization of Earth, and in all forms, four-legged winged beings, two-legged, all forms. If that is the intention, I can feel my bodies begin to flush as I'm tapping into it, and I can feel this gripping in my throat that arrives, that would actually burn, like kill anything. It's like the burning times never ended. in a way. And so our work is always to kind of look in the eye, the force of what wants to take down our power, give it a wink, tend our vibrational pulse, like feel the pulse in your own body and come back into rhythm, because it's actually coming out of rhythm was the way that they were able, they being the oppressive forces of colonization that took down the feminine and instituted patriarchal paradigms. What they did was they disconnected us from rhythm, from flow, from a way of being where we lived as a village connected through heart. And so when you put people in this sort of machine of the modern avalanche of society, where you ask them to move so quickly that they can't think or feel, they just do. We become human doings versus human beings. We come out of rhythm. And when we come out of rhythm, we come out of our voltage. And when we come out of our voltage, we come out of our inherent frequency of our soul. And when we're disconnected from our soul, we're disconnected from the earth and from our capacity to see through these organs of perceptions, to hear through every cell of our body, and to receive in balance with this larger organism of life on earth. And so I think that the deepest remedy actually is to ask who. There's two steps. One would be who, who is gripping, who's standing between me and my intention right now. That's the first question, is like, who is the resistance, rather than what is, why am I getting anxious, or why did I just lose my thoughts and come out of flow? You want to ask, like, who is the resistance? And so if I were to close my eyes and tune into the resistance that comes up when I'm just thinking of how to best promote Seana's work in the world, because I think it could change our entire universe, I can feel soul incarnations of being sacrificed. I can feel English in my lineage. I can feel some of the English soldiers that burned down the pagan temples. I have English in one side and Irish on another side, and I can feel the Russian pogroms that would tear down the Jewish Kabbalists. So I can feel the mystics, like my Irish mystics and Jewish Kabbalists that are living in the lineage behind me, and the perpetrating soldiers that are behind them. And rather than being afraid, I would recognize they're in me. Like this thought that just wanted to kind of quiet my voice, that thought that came in, I would say, I see you, I hear you. You belong to this like tapestry of consciousness that is me, and I'm going forward differently. And I'd probably take out some sound practices, some mantra. I'd put my feet on the earth. I maybe hold a crystal in my hand. I connect to some breath, and I'd invite it to come into rhythm, like feel the pulse of my body and arrive to the present time. And then I'd invite my council members like Inanna to stand behind them. And, when we call in, and it could be God, goddess, larger consciousness than life, the universe, whatever you believe in, to stand behind some of these ancestors that are maybe stuck in trauma. You invite them to stand. It's like the scaffolding that stands behind you, and you breathe in the origin source of light, and it kind of weave that energy all the way up to your heart, and then open the front doors of your heart, and connect to your intention. And you might feel, is this intention really mine? Like, am I writing this book to reconcile what wasn't written in time before, and is it in alignment with me now? Am I out in the world trying to find love in service to filling my mother's heart, or am I actually here, is that really an intention of mine, or am I doing it for my mother? Like, you want to really ask yourself, who am I doing this intention for, and who is this resistance? And if the intention is in alignment, you call forward these resources and you move forward with it. And if the intention is out of alignment, you might give it back to whoever it belongs to, and let yourself be free of feeling like you need to atone for or reconcile what came before you, and find intentions that live in alignment with your life in the current moment. So that's just a quick example.
Oh, Emily, that gives me chills. I can feel it. I can feel you being so in touch with your ancestors and having the capacity to decide what you want to perpetuate and what you no longer wish to carry forward. Thank you so much for that. The unique way that you offer service in the world casts you as an unapologetic heroine, forging new territory and empowering others to do the same. And what I love about your model is the balance of the masculine and feminine in your partnership with Dan, which is also something Inanna emphasizes in her own relationship as a leader and guide to her people, in partnership with her beloved Dumuzi. How do you experience this balance between the two of you in your collaborative efforts?
Oh, I love the way you asked that question, Seana, and just what you just taught me about Inanna in that. I was in this mystery school ritual where we needed to look. We were experiencing our death. It was like a ritual around looking into the eyes of your own death and experiencing like the eulogy. So you wrote your own eulogy, and you experienced the travel into this space of like, if I were to die, how might I be reflecting on my life? And one of the rituals went on to carry us through the gates of Inanna's journey into the underworld. And it was just a ritual that really, really offered an embodied experience of that traveling down into the space that Inanna traveled. And there were people at each gate, and they were inviting you to like take off. First we had to take off all our clothes, and then we had to put our car keys in one space. And it was like you had to let go of all of the things similar to what Inanna went through. We had to let go of all of our adornments. And we got to the last gate, and I was further back in the line. And there was a group of people ahead of me and they asked you like, what's in your bank account? Put this in your bag, in the garbage bag. And it was just all these different things. And at that time, I had lost pretty much everything. I was deeply in my own descent already before going to this like ritual on death. And I thought, okay, here we go. I'm really going to explore my death descent. I was newly sparking with Dan, and I was grieving my divorce. And I got to the place where it was like all the earthly possessions. And I thought, well, I lost all my money. I don't have a house anymore. I don't have retirement. All the questions that they asked me, like, how much money do you have in your 401k? Put it in here. How much? I had nothing. I had lost everything at that point. And all I had was this like incredibly uncomfortable psychic sense and a spark of love with Dan. And I had like a little bit of a pity party and some shame at that gate that I had nothing to put in the bag. Every other bag, I had things like on me, but I had nothing to put in the bag. And I had already, given up my keys in the earlier bag. And I started to cry, and the woman kind of felt bad for me. She kind of stepped out of the ritual, and she looked at me and she said, well, you do have a car. And I said, I do have a car. You're right. I have a car, but I have nothing else. And I kind of breezed by her naked without anything, and anger like erupted in me. Like she thinks a car is enough, anger just like erupted in me. And I had this, bitter victim orientation going on around my death. My descent process. And I went through the rest of the ritual, went into the underworld, had this, cool experience of really understanding an embodied orientation of Inanna. And then the workshop was over then the next day, and I started to drive home, and I was still sort of reeling with a kind of a sadness around how my life was not the way I had thought it, like the dream shattered. And then I got pulled over. There was like these sirens going on behind me, and I got pulled over on the side of the road. And I thought I must be speeding, but I didn't think I'd been speeding. So the guy came over, and the cop took all my information, and then he came back to me and he said, I'm sorry, ma'am, your car is not registered, and I'm going to need to take your car. And I looked at him and I said, you're kidding me. He said, you can get in the back of the police car. I said, I'm not going to get in the back of the police car. I will not do that. And he said, well, you can wait here then. So there I am, just sitting on the side of 95, which is a main highway for anyone listening and doesn't know this area. And, 3 or 4 lane highway. And I'm sitting on this kind of curb on the side of 95. And he pulls off, towing my car away. And I had nothing. And I realized my car wasn't registered because my husband had registered my car every year. And I didn't realize I missed the form. It was my first year not having to do it all myself. And as I was sitting there, I just closed my eyes and I asked for what is it that I need to see. And then Anana arrived, just sitting next to me to show me like, okay, you think you have your car, now you don't have your car. What do you really have? What is it that you really have? What is it that you're here to claim? And in that moment, I really felt the depths of the descent. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I just felt I have my masculine, I have my feminine, I have this deep, deep soul call to shed everything that needs to be released while reclaiming what's at the core. And in that space, I could feel I have a love with a partner that runs far beyond this life and into something so much greater. And there was a part of me that was terrified of looking at it. Like I didn't want to receive love. I didn't want to let anything in that could possibly hurt me again. And so it was in that moment on the side of 95 where I welcomed, what is real that lives in me. And that can actually begin to return, like come back to life. It was like the beginning of coming off of the meat hook and of that resurrection moment of like life is being co-created. It's not happening to me. I'm not a victim of anything. And it's my choice to be in healthy relationship with actually any love that presents itself, whether it's Dan or whether it's the love of my nieces and nephews. It's just how do I embrace the beauty that's here, that's beyond kind of the structures of the fantasies of what life should be. And so in that moment, I felt the grip of the meat hook release and the commitment to collaborating with the masculine rather than being a victim of it. And in doing that, it also resets this intergenerational pattern that the patriarchy has more power or dominance over the feminine uprising of who we are, here to really be on earth, what message we're really here to bring forward. And so by finding a way to work collaboratively with this man who has entered my life and who is also a mystic. I like to think of him as a mystic and a Merlin, very quirky, creative, kind of ET-like creature here traveling the galaxy and bringing love in these kind of intergenerational and psychic ways. It's just such a gift to learn the art of relationship and the art of returning to love after death in some way.
Wow, Inanna showed up for you in the biggest way. Wow, you are certainly one of her priestesses, no doubt. I love the experience that is afforded through the programs that you offer, Emily. In the Empowered Empath and Sage Soul training program, you invite individuals to remember their mystical nature and to deepen their intuitive abilities. It is such sacred work, and it really opens the doors to the magic that's all around us to be able to experience what you did sitting there on 95 and having Inanna show up. I wondered if there were any observations you could share about how helping people to remember their inner mystic transforms their lives.
Yes. I mean, I would say many times there's this misperception that there are only certain people in the world who are gifted and intuitive. And that is a lie. That's not true. Every single person is endowed with the capacity to attune to the information and intelligence of the universe. Just like some people are better athletes than others, there is going to be a spectrum or a range of gifts. But I do find that we all are gifted in some way of the capacity for claircognizance, being able to know, you just know when you see something or hear something, you know what's in the truth of it or at the core of it. Clairvoyance, being able to see consciousness beyond the ordinary in some way. Clairaudience, those people that just always have a quick lyric that comes to mind or a little ditty tune, or they're able to presence sentences and compile words that just spark an awakening. I find there's some that are, I love working with artists who work with their hands that touch wood or metals or objects that have this clairtangience where they can access the history of a tree or the history of, they'll restore boats, and they know what occurred on that boat as they're working with the memories embedded into the wood. Like, we all have these different capacities to access consciousness beyond the ordinary. And I find that as folks begin to awaken their capacities and make it a commitment to overcoming their fear of them, that many times we're afraid of our gifts and it keeps us separate from our truest frequency. There's sort of a worry that I'll go, either number one, I'll go crazy, or number two, it will upset the structures of my life in a way where I can't ever recover from it. And I find it's just the opposite, that people can actually access more of themselves through these gifts. So as you open your powers of perceptions and you connect to the portals of your heart, you will not be walking around alone in the world. You'll be walking around with this posse of consciousness, this scaffolding, or I like to think of it as like a wingspan, with every feather being another ancestor or guide or resource. And life just becomes more magical. It becomes 3D. It becomes much easier to live into your soul's purpose, to kind of know why you're here and have meaning. But to get there, it requires overcoming the fear of your own power, and the fear of how it will impact or impact you or impact your family system. In the Empowered Empaths and Sage Soul program, I'm working with folks that feel deeply and oftentimes are vibrating with the negative currencies that arrive in their own life. They go to a holiday gathering and they are absorbing all the unsaid pain and unspoken or unprocessed suffering, and it takes them a couple days to recover. They feel recharged when they're in nature, but kind of drained after being in the airport or large public spaces. And they don't quite know what to do with the information that's coming in. And in some ways, they end up processing the grief that won't be dealt with by another, and processing the suffering of their lineage. And it's by doing that, in some ways, they're repeating a pattern of sacrifice, which many of us have experienced in incarnations past. So you're sort of sacrificing your body and you're sacrificing your frequency and your vitality to lessen the load or the burden of the family system. And I find when you access your gifts, you can transmute these discordant frequencies in a way that frees the next generation. Like, they will see children and grandchildren living freely within days after a systemic constellation process. They will see their parents or grandparents getting free in ways that they have never been free. So I personally, as a social worker, I've always interested in the person inside the system. And up until now, I've always worked with just the presenting person who showed up in my office. But I find when I work with somebody in an individual or group session, I am impacting the entire collective that is surrounding that person. And it's that to me is an empowered empath. It is a sage soul. Like, when you're doing work with yourself and awakening your own capacities, and it just ripples in this kind of fractal way into all the connective areas, whether you're estranged or not from the family members. You don't have to actually be in physical connection. It'll just ripple into these systems. And for that, it's amazing. And I particularly like working with people that are doing this work in kind of wider ways, because I also want to support our larger collective on Earth.
Thank you so much, because the idea of accessing your gifts frees the next generation is so incredible. And I really appreciate your explanation of that. And really, it speaks to the the process that's unfolding on the earth plane right now, that there really is this freeing up of the divine feminine. She's really making herself heard, speaking her truth loud and clear. And we're seeing examples of this all over the world. As we come to a close, I am so deeply moved by the courageous women of Iran as they fight to dismantle oppression. And given that you also work at a collective level, I'm wondering if, from a constellations perspective, you have suggestions for how we might support our Iranian sisters at this time.
Thank you for that question. And I also am deeply moved by what is happening in all the different areas on the earth plane, where we are in some ways unveiling. So when you ask that question, what comes to mind is the hoods, that are coming off. So for all of time, mystics, priestesses, Apollonian goddesses would be cloaked in these hoods that kept them. They would go out, if they went out into the world, they were hooded, and it kept them separate from the larger public and separate from the influences of the human amnesia or the energetic attacks of the larger populations. And it was a way of kind of protecting what was sacred and veiling what was sacred. And you see it with monks as well, moving into kind of these separate places, these monasteries where they would do their devotional work, but the doors and the gates were closed. Islands were set up, and the island of, in Avalon, it was like separate and closed. The drawbridges would be pulled up so nobody could access. And to me, I've always been very curious about how the feminine is cloaked and separated from this larger collective. So when I see these Iranian women unveiling, taking down the hoods and the cloaks and being seen, and then I see somebody like you, Seana, out in the world unveiling for the first time, maybe in any generation, in any incarnation, that you are creating this podcast and bringing your voice out publicly, that you're writing a book, that you're on Instagram, offering incredible teachings in an unveiled way, that for the first time we are releasing the barrier between the feminine and the wider society, between what's sacred, between the oracle, the mystics, the alchemists, the priestesses, that it's we're available to be touched, and we're touching, and that we're speaking, and it's not separate. It doesn't need to be hidden anymore. It's like, this is the time that the feminine is returning, but it's returning in a way where we are the connective tissue through the ley lines of the earth. If you can imagine, like the crystalline layers of the earth that travel down to the earth's core. When I look at those women, that's what I see, are living embodiments of this crystalline energy, of the light of 100,000 suns, of the trillions of cells that are reflecting the galaxy of light in the stars above. And when they are covered, we can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't feel it. And now is the time for flesh to be touched, bodies to be touched, things to be revealed, and the mystic, the sacred feminine, to be seen in broad daylight and brought to the streets, brought to protests, brought to the libraries, brought to the teachings, brought to all kinds of wider public arenas. These even when I think about us connecting through the computer and the minerals and the nutrients that are used into this connective quality of this podcast as well, I can feel the earth working with us, connecting us. And it's time we unveil. It's time the hoods come off, and this idea of separation, of hiding, is released. Of that the feminine is kept apart, is veiled. The time is over. So I think one of the most beautiful things we can do is connect to our own inner pulse, find ways to unveil as our inner mystic, the inner mystic that we are, to put our hands on the earth and our hearts to the vibrational energies and connect through this ethereal consciousness to empower anybody who dares to see and be seen, to know and be known, to amplify the voices and the visibility of those that are carrying the feminine transmissions that come from incarnations and generations behind them. And when you look at any one being, see the continuum of the orchestra of the chorus of consciousness that's coming through them, and bow to all of it, but bow with the veils off, the hoods off, release the separation.
Oh, thank you so much for your guidance on this. It goes right to my heart. I'm so grateful for your time today, Emily, and for your willingness to share your wisdom. Tell us where we can find you and work with you and the extraordinary programs that you offer.
Thanks, Seana. I first want to just say I'm so grateful to be here with you and to hear your voice through a podcast. It's there's a remembering. There's like a remembering of presence here on Earth by simply hearing your voice publicly in this way. For everyone listening, Seana is by far the most impactful Akashic Records reader and soul reader that I've ever worked with. And she will help you access your capacity for oral transmission, your capacity for aligning with your soul and breaking through these discordant frequencies. So if you haven't worked with her individually, do it. If you haven't bought her book, do not wait. Simply reading one sentence, you will feel the awakening in your bones. So there is this book feels like a transmission unto itself. And when I say that, I mean it like awakens the remembrance of who you truly are simply by engaging with the energetic of the book itself. So I've heard that from many of my clients who have bought it. And I've never had a single person work with Seana who's walked away going, that fell flat. Everybody says, I've never been more seen, more heard, more felt, more known. So just wanted to say that for you. And for me, I'm just so grateful that I get to walk this earth with you, journey with you through life. I offer, right now we're offering an alchemical constellations training and certification program. And this is a program where we are supporting people to really step in to being a facilitator of non-ordinary consciousness. The training introduces a rhythmic approach to masterfully facilitate constellations. So if you are somebody who's working inside the box of some clinical modality, or you're a coach or a therapist, or you're just interested in extraordinary consciousness and you've yet to be like trained in something professional, this program would be for you. It requires a willingness to peel back the veil and look into the mysteries, and to have interest in being in service to your own systemic family field. At the end of this program, you will be able to artfully grow an abundant practice and transmute the effects of inherited trauma wherever you are, whether that's in a grocery store, or whether that's at your family holiday table, or whether that's in your clinical practice. We'll be processing and exploring the archetypal and cultural fractals and collective suffering of everything that I've kind of talked about, but that lives in your bones, your body, your DNA. So that is the thing that I'm most excited about. I also offer individual and family and couple sessions. And I have a program called the Empowered Empath and Sage Soul, which is really particularly for those mystics and intuitives and psi travelers that are interested in coming forward and coming out and being able to step into their gifts. So you can find all of these offerings at seeingwithyourheart.com. There's a free consultation where when we meet with you, we tune into I would tune into your heart and to your field, offer reflections, and give you recommendations as to which service makes the most sense. So feel free to check us out. We offer monthly free gatherings. I think we have one coming up called Looking Systemically at Your Holiday Table or Your Holiday Gathering. So we welcome you to check it out and join our newsletter and travel with us from there.
Oh, thank you. I will be sure to include all of those in the show notes. And Emily, thank you so much for all of this. And to our listeners, thank you for sharing this sacred time with us. May you experience fulfillment on every level with great ease and joy. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Unapologetic Heroine podcast, featuring remarkable individuals living their truth. For more wisdom on how to support your own journey toward honoring your heart and courageously alchemizing our world through the power of love, pick up my book, The Way of Inanna, A Heroine's Guide to Living Unapologetically, at booksellers worldwide.